It's lovely and fall here in New York City and perfect night for Zoom. Hello and welcome to the FBOMB Global Flash Reading. I am your host, Francine Witte, and tonight we have readers from all over the world, actually all over the world, yes. And they're going to delight and entertain you with their wonderful words. And the good thing about Zoom is you already have the best seat in the house. So that's really awesome. So sit back, grab a nice warm drink, and settle in to give a listen to some really terrific writing. I like to break the ice with a piece. So here's my story, just another road trip story. There is a woman, there is a man. I'm sorry, let me start over again. Throw in a woman, throw in a man, throw in a broke down Chevy, throw in a body in the trunk, throw in a gas station, bramble and brush, hopper pumps and rattlesnake shiver, throw in the hot armpit sun, throw in the woman's husband, who of course is in the trunk, throw in the way you eyed the DoorDash guy. No, that's another story. Throw in Arizona. A road trip story is always Arizona. Desert and plump of dune in the background, the man, the woman, the husband in the trunk, pulling into the gas station. Throw in a lonely pop machine where only a quarter will roll out a Coke as crisp and cold as movie Christmas. Throw in the gas station attendant about to open the trunk. I'm going to check the spare for air, he probably says. Throw in the way your husband doesn't look at you anymore, not with anything close to desire. Throw in how you kind of sort of understand the woman in the road trip story and whatever she did to put her husband in the trunk. Throw in the man throwing his meat fist on the trunk. Thanks anyway, old man, we just need gas. Throw in the smell of rotting corpse working into the Arizona air. Throw in how your husband goes corpse when you tell him your life is a desert and his love would be like water. Throw in the gas station attendant going fisheye with suspicion. Throw in how he sidles inside and rings up the sheriff. Throw in a shootout at the end of the road. Throw in the refrigerator, dune in the background. Throw in no one there to check if anything needs air. Throw in you just sitting there with no idea how this story will end. Thank you. Well, we're going to start our reading tonight with April Bradley, the lovely April Bradley. April Bradley is a Durham, North Carolina-based writer, editor, and therapist, and sailor, spinner, and knitter, and weaver. Her writing appears in such publications as Craft Literary, JMWW, Heavy Feather Review, Narratively, New Flash Fiction Review, and Smokelong, among others. April is a Best American Essays Pushcart Prize, Best Microfiction, and Best Small Fictions nominee, and the publisher-editor of Ruby. April Bradley, you need to take yourself off mute.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I don't know if you all are where some of you are. I've been in a 3-year program for clinical counseling, and I thought that I could continue writing and editing, which turned out to be impossible for me. So for at least 2 years, I haven't written anything. And I started back, and within days of graduating, Francine had reached out to me to ask me a question about Ruby and invited me to read here at Flash FBOMB. And I can't tell you how amazing that is. I feel like I'm coming home again after being away for so long. The story I'm reading tonight is an orphan. I actually wrote it in 2015 at Vermont Studio Center when I was a fellow there, and I have sent it out to many wonderful places and received really fantastic rejection letters with invitations to send another story. And those of you who write short like me, having a 3,000 word story or at the time it was about 3,000, it's much shorter now, was miraculous. I didn't have anything else to send them. And so I didn't. And so the story is kind of languished. I put it away for a year or so, then I come back to it. And yet again, I'm going to do something with it, but part of it is I want to bring in the creative nonfiction aspect of it. When I wrote this story, I was thinking about a good friend of mine who was raising the daughter of her husband's lover and trying to wrap my head around what anyone would struggle with this relationship. I didn't know that a few years later that I would be remarried and become a step parent. So in a lot of ways, it's a story I'm glad I haven't published because I think a lot of assumptions would be built into my sense of what my parenthood is now. But anyway, there's a lot of love in this story, and I'll start it. It's gone through a few titles. The most recent title is called The Reluctant Mother. Clary's losing another pregnancy. She watches blood swirl around and down the drain, but can't quite reckon what's happening here in the shower with her body and what's running down her legs and away from her. She attempts to focus on the task of the day and not on her tender breast, not on how she has devoted years in her body and her marriage to conception and loss, and not on how her husband will need convincing to attempt another round of IVF. She hears her 6-year-old stepdaughter shriek all the way from the kitchen, through two closed doors and with the water and fan running. Clary has been awake for only an hour and feels exhaustion flood her bones. The veneer of her fragile personality is worn so thin she can touch the tender spots. She closes her eyes, bows her head under the hot water, and listens to the child scream the house down as if it were opera. Maeve continues to howl. Clary stands just beyond the threshold of the kitchen and watches her stepdaughter and husband. Maeve hollers louder and at a higher pitch. She grabs the berries out of Andrew's palm and with one hand and pushes away from the table with the other, scowling and kicking. Lately, Clary worries more than usual over Maeve. She's been dropping her R's in favor of W's and resorting to I-not constructions when frustration overwhelms her. She snatches things, including food, steals tokens from other children at school and from around the house, squirrels them away in her shoes, in corners of her room, under her mattress. She looks away from a direct gaze more and more lately, and she seems to prefer shouting and yelling to talking, even crying. Maeve growls at Andrew, growls, who laughs and cajoles her over breakfast. She turns her gaze to a bowl of soggy cereal, and Clary fears it's going to end up on the floor. Before Maeve can lunge for the cereal, Clary steps into the kitchen. Enough. Andrew looks up at Clary and flashes a cocky half grin. Good morning, love. Maeve continues to growl at Andrew. Clary doesn't blame her. Sometimes that man doesn't know when to stop. Clary places Maeve's bowl of uneaten cereal into the sink. Maeve, go clean up and get dressed. That includes the clean undies and socks we set out last night. We'll have breakfast at the Sunny Side Up, then go to the beach and look for shells. Mercows. Maeve jumps and wiggles. We'll go to Chaffinch Island. If you get dressed and we get out of here soon, you can see the big rocks and complete your project. Mercows? Andrew asks. He joins Clary at the sink. Clary nods. She thinks the rocks out there look like manatees. That's what she calls them, and she still has some shells to collect for school. Wear your thermal undershirt, Maeve. It's cold out. Get a move on. Maeve stops at jumping and sniffles. Can I have waffles? Clary nods. Probably. Go get ready. Maeve smiles a little, just a little at Clary, sticks out her tongue at her father, then darts away around the corner out of the kitchen. Clary looks at Andrew and says, you shouldn't provoke her like that. We were having fun. Andrew slides his arm around Clary and places his hand just there on her abdomen as he kisses the back of her neck. He smells like apples and sandalwood. He's nearly good enough to eat. Clary inhales, closes her eyes, attempts to tell Andrew about the pregnancy. I but doesn't finish the sentence. Andrew doesn't notice. He talks about, Clary has no idea what Andrew talks about. She rinses out the sink, repeats some words to Andrew as she tidies up, and offers a cheek for a goodbye kiss. She hears Andrew leave the house for his lab, the sound of his car rolling over gravel in the driveway a few minutes later. Clary climbs the stairs to finish getting ready for the day. She passes her office, and her thoughts turn to the quilt she's restoring, a rare whole cloth one from the mid-18th century. Her work, the physical manifestation of what women hand down to their daughters, generation after generation, private histories preserved among layers of batting and thousands of stitches. How many of those stitches were sewn by mothers, Clary wonders. How many hundreds of those stitches were sewn after the loss of a child? Clary meets Maeve in the kitchen. Maeve's bundled up in insulated bibs, a ski coat, and an oversized hat, munching on a donut, jumping around in her heavy snow boots, the obnoxious pink ones that Andrew bought for her. I thought you wanted waffles. Wanted a donut, too. She speaks while chewing. When pieces of dough spew out of her mouth and land on the floor, she stomps on them. Clary ignores the mess, steps through it, and grabs her coat and keys. Eggs, too, she says. Maeve shakes her head and bellows one long, no. Clary insists. Eggs any way you like or no Sonny. You aren't my mother. I don't have to do what you say. This comeback of Maeve's crops up every now and then. She only remembers her mother through photographs and videos, facsimile memories of a woman she no longer recalls. Maeve wields her with perfect conviction. Clary sighs. The muscles under her left shoulder blade flare into a knot, promising a migraine later in the afternoon. You will if you want waffles. So, eggs? Fine. Her response rhymes roughly with wine. Morning like this leads Clary to dread Maeve's teen years. They walk out to the beloved old butter-yellow Volvo wagon, and Maeve shrieks again, "We forgot the clam rake and pail." She runs into the mudroom to find them. Piles of dirty snow bank the roads. The weather report on the radio promises sunshine in the 40s by midday. It had been a bitter Connecticut March, but today was a fine morning, the austere kind Clary likes. The ice slick and glittering on a frozen marsh that sprawls into Long Island Sound. Maeve, blessedly, remains quiet during the short drive to the town green, preoccupied with scraping mud off a shovel. Food improves her mood. Maeve eats scrambled eggs and bacon, devours a waffle with strawberries and whipped cream, then finishes off Clary's blueberry pancakes. Growth spurred, Clary thinks, as she drives past the boatyard filled with covered hulls hauled out on the hard, resting in the cradle of their stands and tucked in to hibernate for the winter. She rolls into the park's short driveway, and Maeve bolts out of the car before Clary cuts the engine. She calls out for Maeve to wait, but Maeve runs. Clary catches up at the top of the trail. Her long coat snags on the brittle reeds and cordgrass as she beats a path towards the humpback rocks of Chaffinch Island. Maeve stomps along in her gigantic princess pink boots, splashing and crushing behind her, oblivious to the uncanny stillness in the marsh. Maeve prattles along with a new lisp through the gap where she recently lost her front baby teeth about wet frozen family land and mercows. Clary grasps one of Maeve's mittened hands and guides her through the overgrowth. When the path turns upwind into a slashing gust, Clary decides that the quicker they get this done, the quicker they can leave. Slow down, Maeve. It's overgrown here. The tide will be coming in soon. We need to be careful. I like it here. I can hide. I can play with the mercows. The grass is taller than you. How far? Where are the mercows? Maeve's fascination with the notion that manatees were once mistaken for mermaids was at first endearing, but she refuses to accept that manatees are not mermaids. Clary fears that Maeve will feel emboldened to come down here by herself. You better not ever come here unless I say so. You need to learn this place first, and they aren't manatees. We're too far north for them. But they look like manatees, Maeve insists. They emerge from the reeds into a drizzle of spindrift and step into a frozen beach. And there they are, Maeve's mercows wearing seagrass skirts at low tide, exposed and coated with dollops of ice. The enormous glacier rocks form a barrier at the coastline, protecting the marshes and wetland. Land, sea, river, and salt merge and collide here. Let's do this quickly. Watch out for the tide pools. They may look frozen through, but they aren't. Maeve squats and begins digging through the mud and swash for clams with the hand rake. Did you hear me, Maeve? Yes. Yes, ma'am, Clary corrects. Now, what did I say? Yes, ma'am. Maeve repeats in a monotone as she examines a shell. Watch out for the tide pools. Tell me what we're looking for again. Don't be fresh. Maeve peeks around from the rim of her hood and gives Clary some good side eye. We need cherry stones and quahogs and some common reeds and a gull feather. I want to find a seahorse. The too big knitted hat Maeve plucked from the back seat by the porch obscures her dainty brow. A black curl she had inherited from her mother loops around a tiny version of one of Andrew's ears. She is a small bird. Clary had known Maeve's mother only by sight, a glimpse and a memory of a hospital fundraiser, a vibrant, startling of a woman with a captivating presence. Clary had been too secure in her marriage and did not notice that the younger woman had developed a sense of familiar ease with her husband. She possessed the confidence of a lover and the flush of a healthy pregnancy who believed Andrew would leave the life he and Clary had built to create a new one. Only Andrew didn't want a new life. When he learned his lover was pregnant, he turned everything over to a family attorney to broker arrangements, then confessed everything to his wife. Clary's outrage devoured her pain. Her passion for her husband transformed into a subsumed, blind fury. She couldn't determine which was worse, his betrayal or the transactional way he dismissed the young woman. She despised him and ached for him. She hated herself for her weakness. She wanted to be happy with a minimum amount of dysfunction. This was the relentless way of things for months, even when he begged, even when he cried. Clary never bothered to contact the other woman, and she never asked about her. She despised herself on occasion for that too. There were photos, a life archived by Clary, put away along with keepsakes, a real estate and money in trust for Maeve later. The only child of dead only children, Maeve's mother, a postgrad in biochemistry, had sheltered her family's history in a one-bedroom apartment in New Haven. Police arrived at the front door of their home late on a winter's evening. There had been a car accident. Andrew's infant daughter survived, born on a gurney in the emergency room as her mother slipped away. They told everyone, including Maeve, that Maeve was Andrew's daughter and little else. Maeve appeared to hold her breath, waiting for Clary to answer. We don't have time to look for a seahorse. You know they're difficult to find, and we have a lot to do with your list. Next time. I want to take a seahorse to school. It's colder than I expected, Maeve. Let's get this thing done. Clary rubs her hands together to warm them up, then crosses her arm. But it's supposed to be an outing. Maeve stresses outing with a little bit of a pout and strikes the beach with her rake. I didn't expect the marsh to be frozen over this far out. Change of plans. Change of plans, change of plans, change of plans. Maeve echoes. I don't like change of plans. I know. I'm going to find the feather you need for your assignment. Look for the shells, Maeve. Clary walks out several yards and stands next to the one of the colossal rocks. She looks out over the water towards Faulkner's Light. There are no boats, no sails to break up the slate-colored sea and horizon. She tastes the briny air and her breath mists when she exhales. She calls out, "What's the name for big cherry stones, Maeve?" Quahog. Maeve's voice dwindles. Clary turns and watch Maeve bend over a partially frozen pool of tidewater. Several feet away, the ice had thawed, freeing brackish water to splash up and out of the pool through an oval in the ice, a dark, tantalizing mirror. The toes of Maeve's boots hover over the edge. Clary inhales, and before her lungs fills with enough air to shout, Maeve vanishes into the inky black hole feet first. Clary flies towards the tide pool. She throws off her coat and skids on her knees to the edge, envisioning their lives falling apart again, imagining the bewildered, damning expression on Andrew's face when he learns she'd killed his daughter. Clary flattens out onto her belly, stretches her arm into the water, and strains her reach, searching for Maeve. Her knuckles skim the slippery material of Maeve's coat, and she moves her arm frantically, desperate for anything of the girl's to grasp. She speaks as though Maeve hears her. Come on, baby girl, come on. Clary submerges her cheek into the shock of frigid water. Fabric brushes against her fingers, and she clutches it. Clary drags Maeve out onto the sand. Those goddamn boots are still on the child's feet, filled with water, and her lips are blue. Clary pries open Maeve's jaws and swipes her mouth. She can't tell if the grit and gunk that comes off on her finger was there when she first stuck it in Maeve's mouth, and says to herself that now is not the time to panic. But she soars above her own body, above Maeve, above the beach and the rocks, above the marsh, the gulls, and the water. She sees Brown's boat yard and the yacht club, her red clapboard house, the thin strip of Jacob's Beach, the spire of the Congregational Church on the town green, the heavy ropes of Route 1 and I-95, then cars and fields and the waterways that surge towards the Sound, toward the lighthouse that looks out to the Atlantic and out toward New York. Higher and higher she soars. Carrie floats through clouds and the stratosphere in a hush. She reaches out to stars, to Sirius, to the Pleiades, and she looks down and observes. She watches herself give Maeve 2 short puffs of breath. Maeve's chest fills up with air and deflates. When Clary leans up to find the tip of her sternum, Maeve's chest remains still. Clary plummets back into her body, slams into it, and dizzy with the shock of sensation, this is what she hears. The relentless slurp and squish of the old wet ski coat, her own panting, brittle voice calling out numbers in tandem with compressions, the tide rolling in like a lullaby, and Maeve's terrible silence. She prays, crying out to God. She promises impossible things. She promises to forgive Andrew, to forgive Maeve's mother. She promises to forgive herself. She promises easy things as if she could grant wishes in exchange for this one thing. Then, instead of counting, she chants. She begs, please, I'll be a mother. I'll be a mother. I'll be a mother. I'll be a mother. Finally, Maeve heaves and vomits, and then she whimpers. Try not to talk. You'll be warm soon. I promise. I promise. I promise. Go get you out of these clothes. What she'd give now for Maeve to take her fill of air and scream. She pries off the deadly princess boots and attempts to unzip the coat, but it jams. She turns Maeve over onto her stomach and grabs a broken beer bottle from nearby. Clary slices her fingers and palm in the first downstroke. It's jagged, hacked work, but she manages to remove the sopping clothes and to massage some warmth into Maeve's frigid and rubbery limbs. Hang on, Maeve. Watch your mercows, darling. Clary finds her coat strewn a couple of feet away. She lies down on the beach, folds the child into her body, and shrugs the coat around them. She finds the pocket that holds her phone and calls for help. As Clary listens to the sirens keen over the Sound and watches egrets wheel across the sky, Maeve's whisper skims across her ears. They sing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was gorgeous and lush and heartbreaking and all the good stuff. Thank you so much, April. April Bradley, wonderful, and welcome back to writing, and reading and all that. Wonderful to have you, April Bradley. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Okay, next we're going to hear from Gary Fincke. Gary Fincke's latest books are The Necessary Going On, Selected Poems, 1980 to 2025 from Press 53, and After Arson, New and Selected Essays from Madville. He is co-editor of the annual anthology, Best Microfiction. Gary Fincke.
Thanks, Francine. Here's After Arson. I'll do a bit of a commercial because I decided to read the two shortest essays in here. And I paired them. They're paired together in this book, although they appeared in an earlier book called The Mayan Syndrome from a couple years ago. And I think you'll see why they happen to be paired. This is called On Location, a Valentine. At Griffith Park a few weeks ago, while I tried to convince my granddaughter that hitting a backhand wasn't difficult, she told me that Emma Stone played tennis for a Battle of the Sexes scene on a nearby Los Angeles court where her friend takes lessons. Down by the fountain, she said, meaning the Riverside court's a half-mile from where she lives. The director, she explained, needed an old-fashioned surface, something that looks like it's in the 70s. She played 4 times by then, 3 of them with me, beginning with balls so pressureless they seemed to hover in the air. I told her I was 17 years older than Bobby Riggs was when he lost to Billie Jean King in the Astrodome, a year younger than Billie Jean herself in the present, where I was teaching her despite my ruined knees and spinal stenosis and a one-handed backhand that puzzled her. She wanted to know how hard it was for me to play with a wooden racket, a thing so strange and heavy, its small, sweet spot that must have made tennis more difficult. When I said I'd once used a Jack Kramer model, she told me he was the movie's sexist bad guy. She loved tennis now, planned to use her own money to buy a vintage outfit like the one Emma Stone wears to play Steve Carell's version of Bobby Riggs. Better yet, she was ready to turn her shoulders early and prepare to swing like Emma Stone, who, like her, had never played until starring in that movie, made her learn how Billie Jean King had bounced a ball before serving and how she had held her wooden racket, switching from forehand to backhand. We were practicing because my daughter had told her I'd coached a college tennis team and spent a few summers as a teaching pro at a country club where successful men during those 1970s had hired me to teach their wives not to be liabilities in the business of mixed doubles, berating them sometimes like minor league versions of the Jack Kramer she had so much disliked when she'd watched the film. The court we were using is built into a landscape of rugged low mountains, a 20-minute uphill walk from where my wife and I stay for the month of January. 6 times we made that trek, and every time we talked the whole way up and down, most of the time about her current life as a 14-year-old. 2 miles above those courts is the observatory where James Dean faced off with the Hoods in Rebel Without a Cause. 2 miles below them is the high school James Dean and Natalie Wood, as alienated teenagers, attended in that movie. She is a freshman there and doesn't imagine herself in the 1950s. My daughter drove me to the Riverside courts a few days later. We stood on the court where Emma Stone pretended to be Billie Jean King winning a tournament held in San Diego. Less than 100 yards away, a row of power lines towered up from where they follow US 5 and the roar of heavy Los Angeles traffic. My granddaughter could walk to that court in 10 minutes and play in the footsteps of Emma Stone. She has a forehand now, sometimes a backhand, and less often an accurate serve. What I kept to myself were the secrets of the once deadly slice of Bobby Riggs, who was born the same year as my father, who, on courts far from Hollywood, taught me what he could from his repertoire of homemade strokes until he handed me to a stranger who changed everything but my backhand. The stroke, he said, was a natural. On the last night of our stay, my granddaughter and I watched Battle of the Sexes together, sitting side by side on the couch. She concentrated as if she hadn't already seen it. At last, she said, "Look, there it is, the court." And we watched Emma Stone run across the 70s court, swing her wooden racket, and deliver the illusion of a winning forehand before we said a half hour of goodbyes. We hugged 3 times. She cried, and I almost did myself. Okay, the pair, you'll see. Mood number 2. It's called On Location, New Year's Eve. Because my granddaughter is 15, my company is necessary for each mile-long walk to care for 2 dogs and a cat. Because our street, the last 100 yards of our walk, feels dangerous for anyone. Because the street is really an alley and badly lit. Because there are budget apartments that sit below the narrow street on one side rather than more single dwelling houses and duplexes like the ones set into the hillside on the right. The new year is 4 hours away when we leave the apartment my wife and I have rented for 6 weeks to avoid winter and visit with our recently remarried daughter. She has saved her honeymoon week until we were available to watch over her daughters. The only complication has been those animals need attention 3 times a day. Halfway through those last 100 yards, an empty car is double parked in the alley, the driver's side door open. Lights extinguished, a curiosity so close to our house. My granddaughter veers right, and I drift her way as subtly as I can muster. The next bend takes us into the street's deepest shadows, just before the flight of stairs to the door. Those apartments are sketchy, she says, when we are inside. The dogs welcome us. They go out the back door and soon return expecting food. The cat, as always, refuses to be seen. In the bedroom, my granddaughter shares with her 12-year-old sister. We play records I've sent her for Christmas, used albums of mine from the 70s. I've guessed that she would love. Queen, Judy Collins, Linda Ronstadt, Harry Nilsson, thinning my collection and building hers. We spend an hour with the music, including an entire side of Nielsen Schmielsen that my granddaughter sings softly along to. The dogs, instead of settling, are restless, pacing to windows and back to us. Neither of them barks. As soon as we walk around the bend, beginning the return trip, we see 2 police cars by the double parked car, its door still open, but now a young woman is inside. Except for the policeman who waves to invite us past, whoever arrived in those 2 marked cars must be inside. What you looking at, bitch, the woman says. The policeman's wave shifts into demand. That's it, keep walking, bitch, the woman calls as we pass him. Fuck you, bitch, she yells as we clear the scene. I wish I hadn't looked, my granddaughter says when we reach the busy highway at the end of her street. Did you look? Yes, I say, but she only talked to me. I think of comforting or explaining, but settle for you'll never see her again. We have nearly a mile for the return walk, but all the rest is where traffic, even on the holiday, is constant. Because we both know there are fewer shadows on the other side, we wait at the first intersection, an awkward one, 3 streets intersecting the main highway, a series of left turn lights extending the wait. Down the sidewalk on our side, we can see a small crowd is gathered where the apartments have a lower entrance. The dogs knew, didn't they? My granddaughter says after we have crossed. Yes, they must have sensed when the police arrived. Back in the apartment, we stay up for the bells and sirens and fireworks from 1,000 yards spreading toward the city. My granddaughter and I, both terrified of heights, choose to stay inside when my wife and her sister step out on the 12th floor balcony. They look like they are in terrible danger, like they could vanish when the railing they lean on collapses. What do you think she could have done? My granddaughter says. Before I can answer, she adds, she didn't look much older than I am, whispering as if it were a secret. Thank you.
Hmm. Oh, that was wonderful, Gary.
It's my daughter's artwork. I got to do a little plug. She does.
Oh,
She
please
does
do. Oh,
covers.
yeah.
She does covers
Oh,
for me.
that's beautiful.
And this, but maybe the half. She's probably done about a half dozen anyway.
Wow. It's
No.
really beautiful. It's wonderful work. And feel free to put any links to your new books in the chat so we know where to get it. Okay. Thank you for being with us here tonight, Gary Fincke. Next up is actually a pressmate of mine from Roadside Press, Dan Denton. Dan Denton is a former union auto worker that helped build the world-famous Jeep Wrangler, and a UAW chief steward that has also been voted the best writer in Toledo. An author of 2 previous novels and a novella poetry hybrid book. His first poetry collection, Fight Songs for the Underdogs, from Luchador Press, or Luchador Press, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, 2025, releases in mid-October. So just about any day now. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, next week.
Very, very nice. Okay, please welcome Dan Denton.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I always feel kind of there's been such beautiful writing already. And I'm a factory worker, so it's going to be a little bit rougher and grittier here for a minute. My book, Fight Songs for the Underdogs, I guess it's blurred. It does come out next week. That's my first poetry collection. And I kind of misunderstood when Francine invited me. I thought this was supposed to be like a prose reading, which I guess it kind of is. Which I do write a lot of flash fiction also. But today I'm going to read from 2 of my novels. I'm going to read 2 short pieces. My first novel that came out from Punk Hostage Press in 2021. And by the way, the reason why I'm doing this is because people have always praised my prose writing. So whatever that means. My first book, $100 a Week Motel, is from Punk Hostage Press in 2021. I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 4. There is a constant stream of new neighbors when you live in a $100 a week motel. You don't need an ID to check in, or even a real government name, just $100. First time I walked into the little office to see about getting a room, I noticed the rules listed on a large piece of poster board written in Sharpie. The poster board was white at some point in its life. It was yellow then, with curling corners burgeoning against pieces of tape so old that they'd lost their adhesiveness twice in the last decade. Years of tobacco smoke and burnt curry had not been kind to the sign. Rules written in poor penmanship and poor sentence structures by American junior high school standards. The ones that teach you the 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4 power paragraph. Those classes never teach kids that power paragraphs rarely contain any semblance of structure. These sentences had no power either. No allow diving at pool, one rule said. But the pool served only as a puddle catcher and garbage collector for many years before my tenancy. How can that rule have any power when even the almost criminally insane that frequented the premises would never consider diving into a pool so bereft of anything considered fun and relaxation that it had long ago become embarrassed about being called a pool? So that's that piece. Thank you. And Francine mentioned we're pressmates from Roadside Press. And I have a novel picked up from next year now from Roadside Press too. But this is my latest novel. It came out in November of 2023 from Roadside Press. I'm going to read you a couple pages from this, chapter 10. And I'm going to try in this one single chapter to explain to you all why America is America right now. All right, you ready? The American factory didn't always just grow money for Wall Street farmers. Once upon a time, a few cancer-sowing, cancer-growing rich white guys built great sprawling factories. Those rich white guys were so riddled with the cancer of greed that they kidnapped village children and made them work 16-hour shifts for their dinner. Those rich white guys that built the sprawling American factories hired private armies to protect those factories. Many American workers were murdered to ensure compliance. Then some liberal folks that are often referred to as socialists harnessed the growing desperation of American workers, who were working for only a half a dinner at this point, and that's if they could beg and scratch enough to find work. And those socialists rode that solidarity of desperation to a working, thriving middle class. Once upon a time, a company CEO made 20 times as much as the man running his machines, and the American dream was planted and it grew. The American dream grew, but it still had cancers and warts and 13 other diseases you can find in the dictionary, but are hard to pronounce. The American dream was born with cancer because it grew from constitutional promises born of lies, and it grew from two of the biggest cancers of them all, religion and racism. The American dream grew because those socialist unions marched and marched, and they shouted clever slogans. They worked to keep the American factory in the business of growing the American dream and not just money for Wall Street farmers. Once upon a time, the American dream grew in plants called factories, and the American dream bore fruit, and the American worker ate well, and subdivisions were born around working cities. The American dream grew sprouts of a future for the children of the American worker, and colleges sprouted revolutions that grew change until the Vietnam War sucked up all the change in Agent Orange clouds that stole whole generations of youth and futures from American workers. The American dream grew until the Vietnam War ground the American dream to a stump, chipping away at the dream by selecting random teenage boys from every town in America, then feeding those teenage boys to a war machine that spit out their names. You can find those names engraved on black granite plaques in small towns scattered all across Woody Guthrie's America. A war machine named Vietnam ate up all the dreams and futures of small town America. A different war machine named fascism smashed dreams of revolution in Chicago 1968. In Chicago 1968, the revolution that was planted at colleges and universities had grown just as the American dream had grown. The revolution held a prayer circle in Chicago 1968, but an army of cops and National Guardsmen, all of whom were our very next door neighbors who only played warrior on the weekends, an army of our very next door neighbors who enjoyed the same fruit from the same American dream. Those fuckers drowned the American dream in an ocean of Agent Orange called tear grass. Then a man with no moral compass was born, and he became president. His name was Richard Nixon, and he lied to everyone and said he was not a crook. That motherfucker was indeed a crook, and he tried to strangle the American dream all by himself. Then an actor that snitched to Congress about other actors got to be president. His name was Ronald Reagan, and he broke the legs of the socialist unions, and he started auctioning off American factories to the lowest bidders across the world, to places where dreams don't even grow. A no-good man named Ronald Reagan destroyed the roots of the American dream that used to grow in American factories, and lobbyists bought the politicians. And with no roots down, the American dream didn't stand a chance. It blew away in great grapes of wrath dust bowls called savings and loan, George W. Bush and stolen elections, 20-year wars on manufactured terrorism, recessions, and reality TV. In a barren wasteland post-Ronald Reagan America, the CEO now makes 300 times more than the worker on the machine, and the three wealthiest men in America own half the country. In a barren wasteland post-Ronald Reagan America, American factories are called plants because they grow money for Wall Street farmers who don't even bother to leave black granite plaques with the names of those it's eaten alive. Thank you, guys.
Oh, wow. I'm like breathless here, Dad. That was really amazing and very important and just great and wonderfully read. Thank you for being here with us tonight, Dan Denton. And please put your link to where we could buy your book in the chat. Thank you so much, Dan Denton. Pleasure. Okay, before we go on, I just wanted to acknowledge the people in the Zoom room who aren't reading, because we have some stars that are reading, but we also have some stars who are just listening. Angelina Bennett, Wendy Lynn Harris, Mina Chang, Jeffrey Bird, Shweta Amit, Niles Reddick, Kurt Tuber, Liam Oliver, Nadgash, Michael Duckwall, Calliope Peleus, and as always, my lovely Aunt Miriam, who will be 101 in January. So I just love that she comes to the Zooms. I just love it. And she always tells me later how much she enjoyed the stories. So thank you for being here. And thank you to all of you for being here, because, you know, you could be somewhere else doing something else. It's very much appreciated that you came here to listen. Okay. Next up, we're going to hear from Kelli Short Borges. Kelli Short Borges' fiction has appeared in Fractured Lit, Moon City Review, Lost Balloon, SoFlo Pojo, Centaur, and elsewhere. Recently, her work was chosen for the Wigleaf Top 50 long list and the 2024 and 2025 editions of Best Microfiction. She is currently working on her first novel. Kelli Short Borges.
Thank you, Francine. I just wanted to say thank you again for inviting me. I feel so honored to be here amongst this group of true superstars. And I wanted to give a special thank you to my neighbor and one of my closest friends, Wendy Lynn Harris. And I've told Wendy this so many times, so she's heard this again and again, but I don't think you all have. Without Wendy, I would not be writing. She's the person that encouraged me to start writing and to help me find my passion. And I am so grateful for that. So again, thank you, Wendy. I'm going to be reading three short pieces today. They've all been published within the last 6 months, and they're not interrelated. They're just three of my favorites that I've written lately. The first piece is a piece that was published in Fractured Lit this summer, and it's titled, "We'll Finally Go to Switzerland." "We'll finally go to Switzerland," he says, "as soon as this is over." She lists the names of towns she's always wanted to see, foreign and sticky on her tongue. Lauterbrunnen, Lucerne, Zermatt, as they sit abreast at the infusion center in Tucson. The thick heat of July pressing on the glass, the long shadow of a saguaro stretched like Dolly's clock in the late afternoon. They Google pictures of snow-capped Alps, fields of cool white Edelweiss and alpine aster, cerulean lakes. We'll ride the lift up from Grindelwald, see Lake Bacalpsee, skinny dip in turquoise water. She shivers, touches his hand, laughs. "See, I'm practically glacial." He gentles the blanket they'd brought from home around her matchstick frame, swipes cherry chapstick along her fissured lips. Her strawberry gold strands long gone, she wears a headscarf printed with cumulus clouds against an azure sky. Blue is her favorite color. After, he says, maybe we'll see tulips in the Netherlands. They've always wanted to go. They'd seen pictures in the fields near Amsterdam and travel magazines placed on coffee tables around the center. Each glossy shot a rainbow of color, rows of skittles against a cloudless sky. Or the windmills in Zonchance. She wouldn't need to walk a single step. He could pull her along behind his indigo bicycle, tip his Dutch cap. "Where to now, m'lady?" "We'll have to go in April. It's the only month the tulips bloom," she reminds him. He counts the months from now to then, gazes out the window and rubs his eyes, excuses himself to the restroom. The drip of red devil burns through her veins as she waits for his return, the liquid moving through a port placed directly into her chest, below her jutting collarbone, and above the place where teardrop breasts used to hang. A flame-colored blotch colors her chest near the port. She watches the poison slide into her body, reflects that the bright clear drip happened to be exactly the shade she'd picked to paint their bedroom last year, just before her diagnosis, Pantone 19, chili pepper. Had it been an omen? She'd challenged herself to move beyond the blues she loved, hoped the color might spice things up after 25 years. The thought of sex now so remote. When was the last time she'd been well enough? The fuzzy, floating thought teases, dissipates. Her eyes droop and flutter, then open again as she senses his return, feels his weight shift next to her, smells the home of him, Irish spring and sweat and pine shavings from his shop. "What about Iceland?" she murmurs. He takes her hand. She'd been there once with his parents before they met when he was just 23. "Tell me about the ice caves again." He tells her how he's never seen any place as beautiful, the ice clear and aquamarine, how it glows as if lit within, how you get so cold it hurts, but only for a moment, how quickly the numb kills the pain, how the ice crystals seem to stretch on forever, how the blue never ends. My second piece was published in Centaur this August, and it's titled "We Don't Meet in Buddha." We don't meet in Buddha like we planned. On the right side of the river, where the lift took us up to the top of Gellert Hill and we had a view of the city, the Danube slicing through Buda and Pest. And we could see forever from our perch above the street vendors selling longos, above the maze, the twisted wind of cobblestones, above the smog. We could see forever from the top of the city, where we ducked under the canopies of almond trees, their nut-sweet blooms anointing us newlywed, my baby pink lips marking you mine, and it was spring then. I remember that clearly it was spring, and even so, I saw winter. And I asked what would happen if the end of the world comes with no way to find you, perhaps World War III or a magnitude 9 earthquake or a tsunami. I saw a documentary and it can happen, I said. Or one of us lost somewhere in Timbuktu without a compass or coins for some ancient payphone, and you laughed and I laughed at the word Timbuktu, but I pressed then, I said, it's a serious question. And you told me, you promised, if the end of the world comes, we'll find each other here at the top of Gellert Hill, at the top of the lift at the top of the city, and I believed you. Me, just 23 and you a year younger, I believed you. Never knowing how many places, how many ways, how many years there are to get lost. And finally, my very last piece is a piece that I wrote that was published in Moon City Review last winter. And the title is, it's really long, Why Charlotte Had to Call Her Sister to Watch the Children so she could visit the doctor as her husband drank whiskey and gambled with the boys at Handlebar J's. Lately, there'd been a heaviness in her chest, a thickening of sorts. Not a sickness exactly, but more like a weight, coiled diamondback tight in the middle of her sternum, coiled around her heart more specifically. And her doctor thought it might be valley fever, which was a clinical way of saying she'd breathed in too much Arizona. Something about the dust, he said. Something about all the years spent in the Phoenix heat, the ungodly heat, with those cactus spine particles of earth kicked up around her, spores settling, suffocating an invisible film. Not a sickness exactly, but something far worse. Something that held on reptile teeth clenched. And she'd breathed it in far too long, he said. The doctor, that is. That was his theory, at least. But she had her own theory. Something to do with her ancestors, something to do with the weight of generations and her place in a long line of women who'd staked their claim among the scorpions, among the thorns in this barren place, staked their claim among the men with their lassos, the men with their guns, the men with their 10-gallon hats, their 10-gallon heads, the heads that held up the world they claimed. And yet, thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Kelli Short Borges. Thank you for being here with us tonight, Kelli.
Thank you.
All right, next we're going to hear from someone who's actually reading tomorrow. It's tomorrow where she is for us, because she's in New Zealand. Is that correct, Sandra? Sandra Arnold is the author of 8 books, including fiction and nonfiction. Her work has been widely published and anthologized in New Zealand and internationally placed and shortlisted in various competitions and nominated for the Pushcart Prize, Best Microfictions and the Best Small Fictions. She's a PhD in creative writing from Central Queensland University, Australia. The lovely and wonderful Sandra Arnold. Sandra Arnold.
Thank you, Francine. Okay.
Anyway.
How do I get this on?
You're on. We can hear you.
It'll just on. It come on. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the flash fiction book that I had published last year in England, and the easiest way to get it is through Amazon. So I'm halfway through reading and writing another one at the moment, and I'm going to read 2 short stories today, which will go into that new collection. The first one is very short, and it's called One Day, One Time. Both of these stories are dealing with my latest obsession, which is on different kinds of bullying from different people. and the importance of grandmothers in their children's lives. Okay, one day, one time. Lift the unconnected from the gaps. Let the words stream down the page. Watch 3 girls drawing chalk circles in the schoolyard. Watch them sliding an empty polish tin into each numbered square. Watch them skipping and hopping and laughing and landing on the square. Watch them with their skipping ropes, one at each end, one in the middle. Watch them chalking a pattern on their wooden spinning tops and whipping them with a leather strip. Watch them playing 2 balls against a wall, now juggling 3 balls in the air. Note their shining faces, their sparkling eyes. Watch them rush to form neat lines when the teacher's whistle blows. Watch the girl watching from behind a wall join the line, carefully keeping her distance from the girl in front, who sneers like a cat ready to pounce on a mouse. When the bell rings at the end of the afternoon, she sprints out the door to catch the bus to her nana's house, where she'll burst through the kitchen and smell the wood fire and the freshly baked cake. She'll tell Nana about those girls, and Nana will tell her to ignore them. Nana will tell her stories about dragons and princesses and magic, and she will stop caring about those girls, and she will feel happy, at least for today. That's the first one. Second one is called Fast and Loose and Woolly Bullies. Patsy's gran never tired of telling her, I left school at 12 and I worked as a maid for some rich folk. I got half a day off once a month and walked 10 miles on that day to my mother's house to hand over my wages. I kept a little back each month until I had enough to buy a lovely brown dress I'd seen in a shop window. I'd only ever been allowed to wear black because that was what all respectable girls wore back then. I took the brown dress home and tried it on, then came downstairs to show my mother. She clapped her hand over her mouth. Brown? She gasped. If folks see you in that, they'll think you're fast. My tears failed to move her, so I took off the dress and handed it to her. Gran always paused in the story at this point before adding, I never saw it again. Patsy had to wait until she was 16 before she could leave school. She found a job in the local library. And with her first month's wages, she bought a miniskirt. When she got home, she put it on and went downstairs to show her parents. Her father's eyes revolved and pinked. You're not wearing that, he yelled. People will think you're loose. Take it off and put some decent clothes on. The library was staffed with elderly spinsters, who Patsy discovered were even worse bullies than the teachers she'd had at school. They all wore home-knitted jerseys, like the classmates she remembered. And what they hated above all else, she observed, were fashion-conscious young girls. Patsy's dream of liberation from school rules and earning her own money were, she soon realized, no more than pipe dreams. When she complained to her grandmother about the librarians, Gran told her to go back to school, qualify for university, and get a decent job. I had no choice, remember, Gran said. Very little education. You know that I love reading, and I always have a pile of books from the library to hand, but I need a dictionary beside me whenever I open a book. So, Patsy, go back to school for one more year. to get your university entrance qualification. Patsy told her it wasn't just the teachers in her school who were bullies. She couldn't face the thought of returning to her old school and being in the same class again with those students who'd made her life a misery. I can't go through that again, she sniffed. Gran sighed, then said, "Oh, Mrs. Lafferty next door told me her granddaughter has just been accepted for Teachers College. She said their entry requirements are lower than university, so apply for a place there, then you won't have to go back to school." 3 months later, Patsy headed off to another city for 3 years of teacher training. After graduating, she began her first teaching job. On the second day in her new school, the headmaster strode into the classroom, spotted a piece of paper on her desk, and reprimanded her in front of her class for having an untidy desk. He wheeled around and strode back out again. The children stared at Patsy with open mouths. Patsy fumed for a whole weekend, then on Monday morning went to his office with her prepared speech. Before she got past the words, I'm sorry you thought my desk was untidy, but the headmaster beamed and said, "Oh, don't worry about it, Patsy. I know you're a good teacher." Patsy decided that launching into the last part of her speech at this moment was probably not the best strategy. She nodded, smiled, and turned to go. Before she reached the door, the head guffawed and said, "Oh, just as well you're a blonde, eh, Patsy? Ha, ha, ha." She didn't turn round, but his voice came to her again as she shut the door. "Lovely legs, by the way. You really suit that miniskirt." When she got home, she put the bag down and stared into the mirror of Gran's old oak dressing table that she'd inherited after Gran died. As she stared into the mirror, she saw not her own face looking back at her, but one she didn't recognize. The eyes were tired and blurred with dark circles underneath. She blinked and another face took shape. Then another, and another. She wondered how many people before her had owned this oak dressing table. How many had stared into this mirror and wondered about all the faces that had been reflected in it over the years, and how many more would be reflected in the future. Were all those past reflections still inside the glass? Was that what she was seeing now? Or was she looking at different versions of herself that she didn't recognize? If that was the logical answer, then the next question must be, which version was the real Patsy? What version did other people see? And how did that influence the way they behaved towards her? She wished she could have asked Gran this question. As that thought formed in her head, she looked into the mirror again and heard Gran's voice. "Patsy, give nobody any reason to doubt who you are." Thank you. That's it.
Wonderful, Sandra. And always love to hear you read. You're just, it's just such a delight to hear your beautiful voice and your amazing words, just gorgeous. And we can
Thank
see
you.
that it's light out. It's Saturday already where you are. You're in New Zealand, is that correct?
It's Saturday lunchtime, yes.
So you know things that we don't because you're in the future for us. So I always like to say that to you. Well, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Sandra Arnold. Next up is another one of my roadside pressmates, Stephen Meloan. Stephen Meloan has written for Wired, Rolling Stone, The Huffington Post, Los Angeles, the San Francisco Chronicle and San Francisco Weekly. His fiction has appeared in Soma Magazine, the Sonoma Valley Sun, Lummox Press, Newington Blue Press, and Roadside Press, as well as at Litquake, Quiet Lightning, Library Girl, and the Rap Saloon Poetry Reading Series. His short fiction collection, St. James Infirmary, was released in 2023 on Roadside Press. Welcome, Stephen Meloan.
Thanks a lot, Francine, and thanks for bringing us all together as well. So I'm actually working on a collection of poetry right now, but my Roadside Press release is a collection of stories. So I'm going to read something from that, St. James Infirmary. And I was just down in LA. A family member has some very serious medical challenges. So I thought I'd read something about Los Angeles, a tale from my childhood. It's called Googies. It had been a long, hard cross-country drive west in our boat-like 1960s Mercury cruiser. My parents could only cover a few hundred miles a day because my brother and I were always hungry or bored or needed to pee. After a half day of driving, my father would finally give in, check us into a roadside motor hotel where we would swim, eat burgers, bounce like monkeys between beds in the musty room, and then fall into exhausted sleep. The final stretch had seemed an eternity of highway, parched plains, tin-badged sheriffs wanting payments for, we suspected, manufactured infractions, and then the haunted moonlit expanse of the Mojave Desert. My parents had purchased an after-factory AC for our new car, a rare luxury for the time, but because of it, the car was endlessly overheating. Knowing nothing about such things, my college professor father opened the hood, cars roaring past us in the starry night. He pulled out his handkerchief, loosening the radiator cap, unleashing a boiling geyser of water that blew 10 feet into the air. He howled into the night like a wounded animal. My mother applied Vicks VapoRub, there in case my brother or I fell ill, to his badly blistered forearm, and we continued on into the desert expanse. So after all that, it was a relief to have finally arrived, to be in Los Angeles. We pulled in at midnight off the Harbor Freeway, our legs stiff, our butts numb. Rolling down the windows brought the distant roar of traffic, which I imagined to be the ocean. The breeze carried with it the smell of oranges and dust and other new and indefinable things. And downtown LA wasn't much back then, almost a ghost town by night. My brother whispered over to me, "It's not very nice here, is it? Not like Indiana." My mother peered out into the solitary darkness, involuntarily gathering her coat around her. I watched her tired face lit in pale fluorescence, reflected in the car's window glass. And once again, my brother and I needed a snack and had to pee. A diner at the corner of Pershing Square glowed in the distance like a solitary oasis, neon red and fluorescent white splashing out onto the dark, oily streets. Googies, the two O's of the sign forming curious cartoon eyes. Cruising past, we saw solitary men inside, hunched on red naugahyde stools, nursing cups of coffee and maybe a slice of pie. I wondered what people were doing out at that hour and all alone. "I'm not taking the children in there," my mother said as we pulled up to the curb. "It's full of bums." My father, tired from the road and his arm still raw, growled back, "If they get hungry enough, they'll get used to it." We were the only family in the place, the young waitress giving us a booth by the window. The unearthly brightness and neon trim felt like a space station. At a nearby stool, a man nervously traced a finger along the pastel shapes etched in the countertop, stubbing out the last of a cigarette and then lighting another. But after a fountain Coke, a grilled cheese, and fries, all felt right again with the world. Even my father seemed in better spirits. We checked into our hotel, the Cloud Motel, just west of downtown. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach, but a glowing swimming pool hummed in the center courtyard, its lattice of turquoise light dancing in invitation. The next morning we all went sightseeing, billowing LA clouds against a painfully blue sky, impossibly tall palms swaying in the breeze, and the jacaranda trees in full purple bloom. It was before the era of smog, and the downtown gleamed like Oz. When we came back to our room later that afternoon, though, we found my mother's dresses and blouses inexplicably stuffed into a plastic trash can in the hall outside the door. My father's face tightened in rage. Like a detective, he slowly unlocked the door of our room. Inside, 3 men in their underwear sat at a small round table, smoking cigars and playing cards. Their wiry black chest hair spilled out from white-ribbed undershirts, and a lone woman lounged on a far chair, her legs crossed, wearing nothing but a bra and panties. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" my father snarled. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" a man who appeared to be the leader of the group shot back. My father spun out to the hall, grabbed the trash can filled with my mother's clothes, emptied the contents into the trunk of our Mercury, and then headed for the hotel office. My brother and I stood outside with my mother, her arms wrapped around us. Inside the glass enclosure, we saw my father waving his arms, his mouth contorting into vague obscenities. In response to something the desk clerk said, my father drop-kicked the plastic trash can clear across the office lobby. He'd never been good at sports, but it was an impressive shot. Minutes later, he emerged with a new room key. "There's a convention nearby," he said, his face still red, "and they needed the larger rooms. It's apparently how they do things here, but we're getting the new room for free and for the rest of the week." I looked at my parents as we made our way to the new room, trying to decide from their expressions whether this turn of events was a good thing or a bad thing. My father suggested we all put on our suits and go for a swim. "Welcome to LA," he said. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen Meloan. And I want to just mention that all of the Roadside Press books, and Stephen read from his and Dan read from his, they're available on magicaljeep.com.
Yeah,
And,
I just posted the link for mine, and I guess everybody else can as well.
there you go. Yes, awesome. Yes, and great selection of books there, and you heard just from a couple tonight, so yes, please check it out, Magical Jeep. And thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Stephen Meloan. Next, we're going to hear from Patricia. She's our penultimate reader. I like to use the word penultimate whenever I can because you can't use it too many times. It just means one thing, penultimate. Penultimate reader is Patricia Quintana Bidar, is a Western writer from the Port of Los Angeles area. Her work has been celebrated in Wigleaf's Top 50 and widely anthologized, including in Flash Fiction America, W.W. Norton, Best Microfictions 2023, and Best Small Fictions 2023 and 24. Patricia's debut collection of short works is forthcoming from Unsolicited Press in December 2025. Pre-orders open now. And of course, I'm sure you'll put the link in. Did put the link in chat, like a wonderful, responsible reader. Good for you. Thank you, Patricia Bidar.
I'm going to try to show. Can you see this? Let's see.
Uh,
I'm going to start this.
yeah, because you're blurred, I think. Yeah.
This is a postcard, but it's an image of
Yeah,
the cover of my book, which you could see if you click the link that I provided. Very excited to be anticipating the publication of my debut collection. So, yeah, hold on a second. I'm going to open my. Oh yeah, the story I'm going to read is set in San Francisco. In fact, it's set in an old apartment, an apartment that I used to live in, but it's completely fiction. But if anything is true or CNF in my stories, it's usually the setting. This story was published quite recently in a journal called Ghost Parachute, which some of you are familiar with. It was their 9th anniversary edition, and I'm very proud of it. And it's called The Untranslatable German Word for a Gate Slamming Shut. Okay. My only friend, little Hansel, smells like closet. That's what my mother said the one time she met the 4-year-old. I had been babysitting him for my weed dealers, a pair of comfy old lesbians. My mother snorted when she saw little Hansel and me dressed alike in our orange sweatshirts and Captain EO sunglasses. When she was my age, she was already in Chanel. Little Hansel may smell of it, but I live in a closet of the walk-in variety. Due to my mother's largesse, she left me this apartment when she died. Her closet smells of Durissimo and leather. I prefer not to use the other rooms. I steer clear of the big bay windows while drinking wine and folding circles of salami in my mouth. Other times I sit on the fire escape beside the trash chute doing a little coke. The only evidence of the neighbors, not the same neighbors who knew me as a child, is the rushing fall of their refuse. From time to time I visit my weed dealer store with its row of hanging salamis and straw-jacketed Chiantis. My dealers aren't Hansel's parents. The towhead lives with his hippie daddy in Humboldt County. Every other month, Hansel and his daddy hitchhike here to San Francisco and deliver weed to the ladies. So really, they are like fairy godmothers. In any case, I was the only one available to watch little Hansel that night last spring. That time, he and I walked hand in hand to the low concrete wall looking down on the North Beach part of Broadway, with bright signs for Big Al's and Condor and the Roaring Twenties. We swung our legs as traffic noises wafted up. I should spend more time outside, I said, and my words hung bright in the dark. Daddy has his eye on you, he said. When I heard this, a glow began in my chest. I'd only met the man once, but he was certainly handsome. He smelled wonderful and kept his hands where they could be seen. Then Hansel asked hesitatingly, wasn't I hungry and cold? I had been waiting for my mother to fall asleep before we returned to the apartment. Hansel and I swung by the corner store. The old Italian man who owned the place sliced us up some of the salami. I added a fresh bottle of wine and a package of gumdrops. There's a theory I read once that every mother wounds one of her children so they cannot leave her. Unlike my sisters, I never quested. The other part of the story, at least according to me, is that the questing children are gifted with the ability to deny. The facts. I awake this morning dressed only in my underclothes, lights blazing and drapes splayed wide. I am sprawled on my mother's velvet couch. There is a tiny black kitten asleep on my chest. Gingerly, I rise to investigate. Curtains open, lights blazing, mouth cottony. I stay away from the window because that's where the telephone is. And sure enough, it rings. I act quickly, drawing the drapes and naming the black kitten Dennis. The voice unspools from the answering machine. It's Hansel's daddy. The clouds in my head shimmer. It was with him I spent most of the previous night. Not here, but in nearby Lafayette Park, across from the house where Hammett wrote The Maltese Falcon. He and Hansel are leaving for Humboldt, the daddy says now, in case I am serious about all I said last night. Hitching is best on Lombard Street, just before the on-ramp to the Golden Gate Bridge. Just meet him and Hansel there at 3 o'clock, if I wish. No pressure, little sister, he says. Dennis has vomited into a pair of my mother's pumps. I caress my mother's row of belts as if they are harp strings. I have a chance to forge my path with little Hansel and his daddy, with his handlebar mustache and golden hair. I will learn what I am about in the deep green pine and cornflower blue of Humboldt County. I will present myself to this new world, strong and whole. I am ready to be a member of the human race. I stuff my clothing into a Louis Vuitton bag. I leave a few slices of salami for Guinness on a china plate. I must get to the bridge. In my rush down the street, I realize I've left the keys dangling from the door. What makes me realize this is the kitten, Dennis, who's meowing right beside me on the sidewalk. It's too late to go back now. I press Dennis in my chest and begin speed walking down Lombard Street. I will offer to tape packets of money to my body, the way Hensel told me he helped carry the packets of weed. We will use strong tape so the packets won't fall off and form a trail behind us. We'll stand at the side of the windy highway, Golden Gate Bridge hulking before us. The daddy is my boss now, you might say. I won't let this one down. Thank you.
Wow. That was great. Great story, Patricia. I was reading it last night in that fabulous edition. Very nice. Beautiful.
Thank you, Francine.
Thank you, Patricia Bidar. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Okay, our final leader is Andrea Marcusa, who is, she kind of has my back as far as the Zoom, and I always appreciate her help. She's very generous about that, and I appreciate it. Andrea Marcusa's writings have appeared in Milk Candy Review, Citron Review, Moon City Review, Cutbank, and others. She's received recognition in a range of competitions, including Smokeworm, Best Microfiction and Cleaver, Prime Number, and is the author of the chapbook, What We Live With Now, Bottle Cap Press. She's a member of the faculty at the Writers Studio in New York City. Andrea Marcusa. You're on mute.
Thank you, Francine. Francine and I are also neighbors, so
Yes.
we're partners in crime together. Anyway, this is a really amazing group of writers tonight, and I was trying to figure out what to read, and I thought I would read a few pieces from my chapbook, which is What We Now Live With. Because even though we keep hoping that we're going to wake up one day, we keep waking up to the same thing. So only a different set of characters or events. So this is called, this one was written during the pandemic, because there's a line in here that you would say, what? It's called Opportunity Meets Preparation. And these are more like prose poems rather than fiction. Why are you throwing out the Valium? They're expired. I recovered the yellow pharmacy vial from the garbage. Inside, the pills look perfectly pink and round. Only the bottle looks cloudy and aged. They're only 4 years old. You keep aspirin longer. That's different. My husband likes to be accurate, knows where he can cut corners and where he cannot. I clean off the outside of the bottle with a Clorox wipe. September 2019, the world's last good year. I push down and turn the tough white childproof cap. A pile of pink discs rests there, ready for whatever comes its way. Degraded slightly with age, like me, the older I get, the more I realize that it's important to be prepared. These rescue Valiums will join my arsenal of young and old Xanax, Neurontin, one lone Vicodin, little neutralizing discs, pink, white, blue, poised to discharge their tonic, carpet bomb the mind, limbs, dull all that hurts, head to toe, in their own outdated, degraded, past shelf life way. At my age, it's important to find pick-me-ups, panaceas from the dark threat that's always circling there on the edges. I like to be ready for I'm not sure what. You see, Even after all these years of living and planning for all manner of catastrophe, I never really realize it when disaster first hits me. So that's the first one. Second one is called cells. Sometimes I wonder about how, if all the cells in the body replace themselves every 7 years, what about memories? How do they stay there in that dark space in your head, the unsettling spot that you forget about while you're searching for a parking space or strolling on the beach to see what the tides brought up? But then you reach down for what you think is a conch or even an ordinary clamshell, and as your hand disappears into that cloudy ocean and you feel around on the sand, you touch something slippery. And that feeling creeps back, reminding you, the one you thought had finally left, the one you thought all these years, after all these years was gone. Besides, everything happened so long ago, and you've produced all these fresh new brain cells since. But here's that feeling flooding back, hollow, queasy, disturbing. And you can't figure out how this can be. After all the wine, Xanax, tobacco, pesticides, and junk food, decades of smog, years of cell phone minutes, and x-rays of all kinds, why isn't this feeling completely altered or at least blunted? Like your fading eyesight and shrunken spine, and the way the tops of your hands have gone blue-veined and brown-spotted. But these ancient feelings are as robust and as strong as ever, holding on tight. Long after the neighbors next door have moved away, your parents' ashes are scattered in the wind, and the dogs and the birds live in shallow, sad graves under the porch. And then this is the last one. This is called What We Now Live With. As I pull the door to our beach cabin closed for the last time this summer and felt the lock click into its hollow, I looked up and saw the sun had already shifted and now bathed the back porch in fall pale light. I knew the real world was almost here again. My children and husband were already in the car, so filled to the brim it sat low on the ground, and although soft jazz was playing on this car's stereo, we were all in our own worlds. I thought about the winter months ahead and didn't know what they would bring. A spray of angry bullets in a classroom, a flood of dammed up bitterness surging in our streets, a headstone with an unexpected name. I thought about our home in the city, how when we left, last century's houses were being pulled down and turned into piles of bricks, and week after week, concrete and glass floors were pushing higher and higher, casting long shadows that had never been there before. Would they all be so tall when I returned that they'd scrape the clouds? Would winter storms batter our shores again and pile up record-breaking peaks of snow or send rescue boats into our streets? I settled into my seat, buckled my belt, and my husband backed the car out the driveway. When we turned onto the road, I just couldn't look back on all that shuttered peace and happiness we had found in our home away from headlines and posts and warring TV talking heads. For 4 weeks, we'd lived in a news and internet void filled with the songs of birds and the citron glow of fireflies, the flights of herons diving for fish on the bay, the sound of dice rolling on a Monopoly board, and the whistle of badminton shuttlecocks. Our weather forecast came from the heavens: red sky at night, sailors' delight; red sky at dawn, sailors forewarned. As our car pulled further and further away, the feeling I'd put to rest for 4 weeks stirred. The one that made me feel as though I was living on borrowed time, and that this happiness that I savored for a few weeks was not mine to possess, but only taste. Despite the peace and joy still circulating in the car, carrying the four of us, A fear of what I couldn't foresee gripped me. As we pulled further and further away, I thought of the millions of parents all over who, like me, were holding this huge, untenable thing called family, forever trying to keep it whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Beautiful, beautiful. Andrea Marcusa. And I want to thank, I just thought this was just a gorgeous collection of voices and styles, and just really beautiful. I want to thank the readers for their time and their talent, and coming and giving us time tonight. April Bradley, Gary Fincke, Dan Denton, Kelli Short Borges, Sandra Arnold, Stephen Meloan, Patricia Bidar, Andrea Marcusa. Find these people online, hunt them down, okay, buy their books. They are awesome. These are awesome, awesome readers. And thank you to the people in the Zoom room. And thank you for those of you listening on the recording. And this was a really great night. And I want to thank everybody. And we're here next month again. The date will be announced on Facebook. And I'm here from New York City, Francine Witte for FBOMB Global Flash Reading. And good night and drive safely.